I rode the last ridge before dawn and felt the air change as if a new country had been unsealed. For weeks we had followed tracks of salt and sun, the caravan a measured breath moving across the plain. Then the world below opened to green terraces, orchards, and a long bright seam of water crowded with masts. The sight struck me like a story made true, a city that rose where land met sea, its ships standing like a forest upon the water. The road into the province thrummed with life I had not seen on our side of the frontier. Traders bore glass, tin, and bolts of cloth. Soldiers rode in tidy ranks with banners snapping above their helms. Women carried trays of olives and figs, their laughter brisk as the morning. Latin and Greek braided through the air and met the clipped syllables of local tongues. The market's cries became a new music I listened to, with the care of a man learning a long poem. Even the dust felt different, carrying the faint perfume of spices that clung to cloaks and sandals. When the wall rose before us, I felt suddenly small. They were not crude ramparts, but careful stonework. Towers at steady intervals, crenellations like teeth against the sky. A great gate opened and closed with the sound of a chest shut upon treasure, and men leaned down from the battlements to watch our passing, as if we were a curious pageant. Above their heads, banners stitched with eagles and crosses fluttered, fierce in colour. I shaded my eyes and could not help measuring our own court by the scale of these walls. Inside the city, the streets unfolded with a kind of ordered breath. Straight avenues led to plazas where fountains threw water into basins carved with figures. Marble gleamed at the corners of public baths and under the porches of temples. I walked among mosaics that held light like trapped birds, and I smelled smoke from hearth mixed with incense and tar. Workshops hissed and hammered. Merchants weighed goods with hands that had seen countless coins and cares. The city moved neither rushed nor careless, but with the confident rhythm of long habit. People watched us with a calm curiosity. A child followed our interpreter to see the coin we displayed, and then darted away, laughing. A matron measured cloth and asked, as if trading were always the first duty, whether the governor had raised the levy. My retinue kept close, for pride is a fragile thing in foreign courts, yet there was no open hostility, only the practiced appraisal of a populace used to strangers and to its own manner of keeping counsel. A procession passed at noon. A magistrate in lacquered carriage, flanked by soldiers whose armour flashed like a river. The populace bowed where protocol demanded. A herald's voice rolled across the square announcing edicts in the tone of public law. It was display and lesson together, the grammar of power made visible, teaching order as surely as any rope or spear. That evening I stood upon a bridge and looked across the harbour. Lanterns drifted on the water like stars that had fallen to moorings. Ships sighed in their anchors and the lights in windows trembled one by one. From that height the city became a map of sound and light. Baths steaming, taverns singing, lamps at windows like eyes. I thought of my sovereign's palace, its cool courtyards and tapestries, and felt both kinship and a thin edge of rivalry. I had come to speak for my king. In this first hour I understood that to do so I must first learn how to be seen in a place that had learned well how to be looked upon. We rode east for 2 more days, following the trace of the sea. The wind grew salt-heavy, and the road widened as if expecting greater things. Villages thinned, replaced by villas draped in cypress and stone baths whispering with steam. Pilgrims, merchants and soldiers all seemed to move in one direction, as though the city itself were drawing breath and pulling us toward its heart. At dawn, on the 3rd day, the hills parted. I reined my horse and saw it, Constantinople, massive, white, and shimmering like a mirage. The walls seemed to rise straight from the sea, layer upon layer of marble and brick, each higher than the last, crowned with towers that caught the sun. The harbour was a living field of colour, sails swelling, gulls wheeling, smoke curling from distant forges. Bells rang from unseen towers, and even the sounds seemed wrought of bronze and discipline. We halted, overcome by the sight. My attendants whispered the names they had heard in campfire tales. The city of the world's desire, the new Rome. I remembered the polished courtyards of Ctesiphon, and felt pride resist envy. Yet what lay before us was not boast or ornament. It was empire, visible and breathing. I thought of our scholars who spoke of balance between heaven and earth. Here men had built their own balance out of stone and water. A company of Roman riders met us before the gate. Their officer spoke Greek so cleanly it sounded rehearsed, his courtesy like armour. He read the seal of our mission and gestured toward the city, where a columned road vanished between gates carved with saints and emperors. As we entered, a chorus of scents met us: sea brine, incense, roasted grain. Every doorway opened on something orderly, something shining. The streets were paved smooth enough to mirror the hooves of our mounts. I saw beggars too, but even they sat as if arranged for a painter's eye. Crowds parted to watch our procession. Some crossed themselves, others murmured about Persia as though we were figures from a fable. Children ran beside our horses until the guards shooed them away. I kept my gaze steady, unwilling to show either wonder or disdain. Yet within I was neither envoy nor rival, only a man who had glimpsed what ambition looks like when it learns patience. We passed through markets where goldsmiths struck metal so fine it sounded like music. At a square's centre rose a column taller than any minaret I had known, topped by the bronze form of an emperor lifting a cross toward heaven. The air shimmered with heat and faith. My translator whispered that beneath the statue lay relics of saints and pieces of the true cross itself. I did not answer. My silence was reverence enough. When night fell, the domes of the great churches caught the last fire of sunset. Lamps were lit across the harbour until the sea seemed to wear a crown of light. I thought then of the long road home, and how no description, however skilled, would capture this moment. To have seen this city was to know the measure of distance between two worlds, one built on memory, the other on glory made visible. The summons came at sunrise. 2 officials arrived at our quarters, robed in blue silk embroidered with small golden crosses. They spoke little, their gestures deliberate. We followed them through a warren of courtyards where fountains whispered and soldiers stood like painted figures, still even in the wind. Each gate opened to another layer of ceremony until the air itself seemed trained to silence. I had known courts before, but this was theatre bound to discipline. At last we reached the hall. Its doors, cast in bronze, were carved with scenes of emperors offering gifts to heaven. Inside, the light filtered through sheets of polished alabaster, turning every movement slow and sacred. Incense curled from tall braziers, sweet with frankincense and resin. The floor was a mosaic of seas and beasts, so finely laid that my steps felt like trespass. Musicians played in a gallery high above, flutes and strings weaving a sound that seemed to hold time still. Then he entered, the Emperor of the Romans. His robe was woven with gold thread that caught the light in ripples, and his crown blazed with gems that turned as he moved. He did not walk so much as glide, carried by the rhythm of the hall itself. Behind him came courtiers with staffs and scrolls, their faces schooled into the serenity of long habit. The chamber knelt as one body. I followed suit, the weight of 100 eyes on my back. When I rose, I met his gaze. It was not the look of a man, but of an office so ancient it had become its own creature. My interpreter spoke the greeting of my king, naming him the friend of peace, the equal of the Caesars. The emperor's reply came through a golden-mouthed official who recited it as if from scripture. Words of courtesy, edged with power, filled the hall. Honor for Persia, praise for wisdom, warnings dressed as blessings. Every syllable balanced between grace and caution. A servant approached bearing a silver bowl of water. The emperor dipped his fingers, then extended them toward me, a gesture of cleansing and truce. I accepted, touching the water to my brow. The hall exhaled softly, and I sensed that in this single ritual the distance between our empires had been measured and recorded. When the ceremony ended, gifts were exchanged: silk from Susa, crystal from Antioch, a sword with a hilt of carved ivory. I bowed once more, my heart steady but my thoughts racing. The emperor turned and vanished behind a curtain of gold cloth, leaving the hall suddenly smaller, as if light itself had withdrawn with him. Outside the air was cool, the city stirring into afternoon. Bells called the faithful to prayer. I looked back once at the palace gates, now closed and quiet, and thought of how our histories, though written apart, had brushed for a moment in that room of light. I had come as envoy, but I would return as witness, to say I had seen the mirror in which two worlds measured themselves and found neither lacking in splendor.